Imagine this. You're a king. The people standing closest to you, the ones you trust the most, are the same people who grew up with you, your friends. But one day, you discover something shocking. The people secretly plotting against you are not your enemies. They're your friends. This dark truth about human nature has repeated itself many times throughout history. And that's exactly what Robert Greene explains in Law 2 of his famous book, The 48 Laws of Power. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. To understand why, we need to go back to one of the most powerful kingdoms in European history. The story begins. 17th century France. A young king rises to power. His name was Louis XIV. He would later become one of the most powerful monarchs Europe had ever seen. But when Louis first took the throne, France was full of political tension. The royal court was a dangerous place. Nobles, ministers, and advisors were constantly competing for influence and power. And Louis had already learned a very important lesson about people. The greatest threats rarely come from enemies. They come from people who stand closest to you. One of the most powerful men in Louis XIV's court was his finance minister. His name was Nicolas Fouquet. To the outside world, Fouquet looked incredibly loyal. He served the king, he supported the crown, and he managed France's finances. But one day, Fouquet organized a massive celebration in honor of the king. And this wasn't just a normal party. It was one of the most extravagant events France had ever seen. There were golden decorations, rare works of art, beautiful gardens, and hundreds of servants attending the guests. The palace used for the party was unbelievably luxurious. In fact, it was even more impressive than the king's own palace. When Louis XIV saw this, he didn't feel impressed. He felt suspicious. A question immediately crossed his mind. How could my minister afford something this grand? In that moment, Louis realized something important. Fouquet wasn't just a loyal servant. He had been secretly building his own power and influence. And one day, that power could easily turn against the king. This is the hidden psychology of power. The people closest to you often begin to feel something dangerous: envy. So Louis XIV made a shocking decision. He ordered the arrest of Nicolas Fouquet. The man everyone thought was loyal was suddenly removed from power. Instead, the king promoted another man, a man who had not always been part of the king's inner circle. His name was Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Unlike Fouquet, Colbert had something very different. He had something to prove. He needed to earn the king's trust. And because of that, Colbert became one of the most loyal and effective advisors the king ever had. This story reveals a powerful truth about human nature. Friends often feel entitled to your success. They believe they deserve the same power you have. And when they don't get it, jealousy slowly begins to grow. Enemies are different. When an enemy is given a chance, they work harder to prove their loyalty. They want to show they deserve the opportunity. That's why Robert Greene warns us. Friends may betray you out of envy, but an enemy who becomes your ally can become one of your strongest supporters. This pattern doesn't just exist in royal courts. It appears in modern politics, in business, and even in everyday life. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who secretly compete with you. They compare their success with yours, and that comparison can quietly turn into resentment. This law doesn't mean you should stop trusting your friends, but it does mean you should never trust blindly. Pay attention to people's behavior. Watch how they react to your success. Because in the world of power, understanding human psychology is more important than trusting emotions. And that's why Law 2 teaches us. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.